Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast. We are live on the postcast following the Timberwolves loss to the Denver Nuggets in Game 2 of the first-round playoff series. Marney Gellner from Bally Sports North joins the show to break down the game. The Locked On Wolves postcast starts right now.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm joined by Marney Gellner from Bally Sports North. We're going to talk about the Wolves' loss to the Nuggets here in Game 2. And this one was, I don't know, there's a lot to unpack. The Wolves were, of course, down by as many as 21 in the second quarter. They were getting completely run off the court. They were down 15 at halftime. But then they score 40 in the third quarter. Anthony Edwards comes to life. They get a good third quarter from Rudy Gobert. And all of a sudden, they're back in it. They actually take a lead into the fourth, lead with about 6 minutes to play. And then Jamal Murray goes nuts down the stretch. The Wolves ultimately fall short, lose by 9. A lot to talk about in this one. Where do you want to start, Marty?
Well, it was a whiplash kind of game.
It was.
It was so bizarre to watch the first half and then see the Timberwolves come out like they were shot out of a cannon to start the third quarter, because there was just no sign that was about to happen. And it was wonderful and awesome. And that's a huge takeaway for me in this game, was to see that Wolves team, that energy and that capability on the offensive end and defensive end, because there were no signs of it up until that point.
Yeah, and it feels crazy to be sitting here in the playoffs talking about what I guess we could call a silver lining. I think we could describe it that way. But I agree that it's important, because this series could have been like over. And now at least there's a glimmer of hope that, like, hey, this is a matchup that the Wolves can play okay in. You can go toe-to-toe with Jamal Murray, with Anthony Edwards, as they did for a while. KarlAnthony Towns and Nikola Jokic, that matchup's a bit of a different story, but like, you can also throw Rudy Gobert in there and the way he defended Jokic. There was a lot to like about the second half of this game. And equally as much, a lot to really hate about the first half. There really wasn't, starting to prepare what we were going to talk about in the second quarter, I had no idea where I was even going to start, because there wasn't any one or two or three things the Wolves weren't doing well. They just looked completely unprepared. And ultimately, you could have said the first 6 quarters of the series were just really bad basketball for Minnesota. And I don't know what happened at halftime, but the third quarter was awesome. It was completely a 180 from what we saw in the first half of this game. In the first half, it was like they were barely going through the motions. The offense was disjointed. Thankfully, there was a brief, bump at the end of the second quarter that got them to within 15. But then the third quarter, they played great.
Yeah, they were being dominated. They were being dominated on both ends. The Wolves were they were two missed shots away from shooting in the 20%, 28, 29. Like, they were hovering around 30, 31% the entire first half. And Denver was shooting low 60% in the first half. I mean, it was just as one-sided as we've seen a game this season, except for game number 1 in Denver. I mean, they were two of the most, I don't want to keep saying dominated, but I'm trying to think of another word, because it almost looked like shell-shocked. Like the Wolves didn't know they were going to play the Nuggets. Like, they were preparing for a team, and then the Nuggets came out and they were like, what? That's how it just looked so disjointed and out of sorts. And then, just as much as it looked like that in the third quarter, I mean, that switch flipped immediately. And this team looked like it was on a mission, like it had secret game plans and knew exactly not only who they were playing, but what the Nuggets were going to do, and had a counter for this and that, and started punching back and hitting all the right buttons. And it was just wild to watch and wild to see. And that second half of the basketball game tonight was incredibly entertaining. And it got physical, and you had guys flopping and flying and being hit over the head. And that's part of what makes a playoff series so fun for fans, is you get in these little heated moments. Rudy Gobert with the tech, because he's so fired up. And while you don't want the tech in that moment, you just love the passion and the fire that came out of him. And I feel like those are huge positives for the Timberwolves going into games 3 and 4 at home, to find that energy and passion and that just good basketball again in the second half.
Yeah, and let's focus a little bit more on the second half. I feel like the first half we'd be rehashing what we talked about after Sunday's game. So, I mean, in the third quarter, I thought the Wolves did a really good job offensively of they ran a lot of pick and rolls. They ran a lot of Ant Gobert pick and rolls, which weren't always successful during the regular season, but there felt like there was a little bit more of a comfort level. There was still a lot of successful Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert pick and rolls, a couple of nice lobs. Gobert finished, I think, with 19 points in this game. And Cat was spacing the floor, and Cat, we'll talk more about him in a minute. He did not play well, but in those moments in the third quarter, he was not directly involved in a lot of those actions offensively, and having him spacing the floor, I think, helped create space in the paint that just wasn't there the other night when the Wolves were running a lot more Cat post-ups, etc. This, I thought, was the right. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker had some great. He's a very good cutter. He had some great cuts. Hit a big three from the corner. There were just these moments during that 40-point third quarter where the offense was humming along. The ball movement was to where I would think Chris Finch would want it, and it just felt like they were very comfortable. And on the other side of the floor, I actually thought Towns played really well defensively, and so did Gobert during that stretch in the third. And sure, they scored 40 points, and I know Mike Malone was real upset with giving up the 40 points at 80% shooting or whatever. But I mean, Denver also only scored 23, and a big part of that was Rudy Gobert contesting everything in sight and Towns grabbing a bunch of big defensive rebounds. As bad as he was offensively, Towns was, there was that stretch in the third quarter where everyone on the Wolves pretty much played well defensively, and the offense was just kind of humming along.
It really was. It really wasn't. I've heard you mention the Towns minutes or production and the Gobert minutes or production, and I do think that was also something very positive and very important that came out of this second half tonight, was that we saw, actually the full game, we saw a decent amount of Towns and Gobert playing on the court together, and especially in the second half, playing well together. And whether that's a development that you think is important to this season or answers some questions for this team going forward, I feel like anytime those two can be on the court together and the team is playing positively, then that is beneficial for the Timberwolves. It's beneficial to the future of this team to figure out how those two can work well together and how the rest of the team can function. Because sometimes when they're both on the court, it just feels like all the space is taken up and nobody has anywhere to go. But for whatever reason in the second half tonight, I know Karl was out for a period of time with the foul trouble, but when they were in together, they were overlapping minutes quite a bit. And Anthony Edwards was still driving the lane in the second half and finding room to get to the basket. So whatever formula and combination and positioning the Timberwolves found in the second half to be able to use their bigs lineup with success is another positive that you can take heading into games 3 and 4.
Let's talk about our title sponsors from the postcast tonight. That's our friends at Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have at the event. Gametime is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. They have deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag your tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Terms apply. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, you mentioned Anthony Edwards. Let's talk a little bit more about him. I mean, this is probably the longest we've ever gone into a show where somebody scored more than 40 points, so we didn't really talk about them at the beginning. He scored 41 in this game, and it was a really nice, I don't want to say bounce back, because in general I thought he played okay in game one, but he just hasn't really looked like this version of himself that we saw in game two in a couple of weeks. You could trace it back to the illness or the ankle, but he had that bounce in his step in this game really for most of the night. There were these moments in the second half where he turned the corner and you have that brief moment where it's like, why doesn't he do this every time down the floor? And obviously it's not that simple, but he makes it look that easy where you wonder that for a brief moment, like, could he just score every single time down the floor? Because that burst is so incredible, and he showed that in a big way in the second half in this game.
I feel like that is a gift of Anthony Edwards, is when he gets rolling like that, when he gets into the mode of I am getting to the basket, so many good things happen, because sometimes he got to the basket and there was no room and he made a kick out pass for someone to shoot a three. And we didn't always hit the three, but it's an open look. It's a good shot. It's a playmaking shot. Sometimes he missed the layup and Rudy Gobert got an offensive rebound and put back. Sometimes Ant got fouled and went to the free throw line. Like, so many positive good things come out of Anthony Edwards and his ability to get to the basket. I feel like for me to judge, when I think, okay, this is A+ Anthony Edwards, this is when he is at his best, is when he has these incredible athletic, breathtaking finishes with his left hand. And you would swear he is a natural left-hander because of how fluid and spectacular some of those finishes are. Even though he makes them look pretty easy. I saw Ant do that a few times tonight, and I thought whether it was his mindset or he just noticed that he was able to get there, and so he thought, why not? His determination to keep going and going and going at the rim was what got him going. Because in the first half, there were several three-pointers, and he made a few of them. It was like he was starting to find his rhythm or finding his shot, but it wasn't until he kind of turned that corner in the second half and just went into the lane and drew the contact and drew the bodies and fought through all the traffic. That's when it started to click in, and that's when he became the Anthony Edwards that we saw carry this team through the entire middle half of this season. Another huge positive for the Timberwolves that they're going to need in the two games over the weekend at Target Center, for sure.
Yeah, on the flip side, KarlAnthony Towns, not a great game for him, and he didn't get off to a good start. I think he had 4 turnovers before he ever made a shot from the field in this game. For stretches, he guarded Nikola Jokic. That didn't go all that well, and in my opinion, I think there's I don't know if Chris Finch spoke on this or not after the game, but I think with the way that Karl plays and how emotional he is, I think the way that Jokic plays can bring some of the worst parts of that out. And in my mind, that can kind of lead to maybe some I don't know, the term we've talked about stray voltage that I think was a Chris Finch-ism at some point. It feels like there's a little more of that because Jokic is so good at pulling that out of because Jokic kind of has his own version of that where it's a little less stray. It's just kind of like there's Jokic voltage. Like he's just doing Jokic things and he gets under your skin. And that's not the best match for Cat. And I think when he guarded Aaron Gordon, who's really the Nuggets' fourth option, that seemed to work a little bit better. And offensively, Cat just never found a rhythm. They tried running through him when Ant was off the floor, and it just didn't feel like it was there for Cat in this game. And then he missed a wide open 3 from the corner that would have cut it to a 4-point game with about 40 seconds to play. So, when the Wolves were kind of still hanging in it, just not a great game for Cat. And obviously they need, this version of Ant and then something like the Cat from most of the Lakers game, last Tuesday on Friday, if they're going to beat the Nuggets.
Yeah, that would be really, really helpful. And there was no sign of Karl starting to struggle at all. It was a little bit odd to see the way that he played in games 1 and 2. Maybe game 1 less so, because even he said afterwards that he was happy with the shots that he took because they were good shots. He wasn't getting wild. Yeah. And he said the ball felt good coming off his hands, and he was super confident. Just was like, yeah, just missed shots. Fine, I'll hit him next time. But then when you have a second consecutive game like this, and their foul trouble was a part of it, and emotions were a part of that. So you kind of put all that together, and it's like an ineffective Cat, although he had 12 rebounds. So he was not completely ineffective, but it is not the Towns that is spectacular and electrifying and can lead this team and can take him on his back like he did in the 2 play-in games. I mean, he was spectacular. KarlAnthony Towns was spectacular in the final handful of games that he played, but he has yet to find that. I mean, he hasn't even really had he definitely hasn't had a spectacular quarter yet in the playoffs, in this playoff series. But hopefully it's just a matter of figuring out the spacing and playing on the court and having the Rudy minutes. And I don't know. I mean, teams are really scheming and really game planning against him. This is the playoffs. It's how it's going to be. But if he can find something and get that shot back going, yeah, that is definitely something the Wolves are going to need.
Yeah, and kind of putting a bow on this whole thing, and this is obviously oversimplifying it, but the Wolves aren't as bad as they played in the first 2 quarters of this game, and there isn't that big of a gap, I don't think, between Denver and Minnesota, not 15 points and a half. And the Nuggets aren't as bad as they were in the third quarter of this game. The Wolves outscored them 40-23 or whatever. The fourth quarter, I think, is more in line with what we all expected to see in this series, which is Denver might have the edge, but when Ant is on his game, Ant or Cat, but in this case, Ant, then, Ant could be the best player on the floor at any moment. And therefore the Wolves have a chance in this series. And it was a ton of fun to watch him and Jamal Murray go back and forth, to see, as you mentioned, the physicality and the passion between Gobert and Jokic, and it just is so much fun. And that's what we're hoping to see here moving forward. So I think it gives you some hope that this could still be a really exciting, entertaining series, because we did see that in the second half of this game. And, the Wolves will hopefully bring that to the table on Friday. They play Friday night at Target Center at 8:30 p.m. tip, and then at Game 4 on Sunday. So obviously I would say it's imperative that the Wolves pick up a win on Friday night heading into the Sunday home game in Game 4. But we'll see what other adjustments Chris Finch might make before Friday. We saw Nickeil Alexander-Walker not start in this game. Instead, it was Taurean Prince. Prince played well, but he got into foul trouble early and often in this game, and actually only ended up playing 18 minutes. So we'll see what other adjustments Finch makes. But Friday night should be a fun one if it's anything like the second half of this game.
Well, and those Target Center fans have been waiting to chant and try to get under Jokic's skin, just like the Denver fans. I mean, you heard the "refs, you suck" chant just loud and clear. And we saw Rudy Gobert get hit on the head. We saw Jokic get hit on the head and go down. We saw multiple players. I mean, the emotions after just 2 games are right there. They were boiling to the surface. And that's part of what gets the fans into it. And that's part of what makes a series so passionate. And I think we are right there. So Games 3 and 4 at Target Center, I think, are going to be a lot of fun. And I feel like the Wolves are for sure going to get one in these 2 games. They may even the series, Ben. They may. But I think for sure they're going to get one. I think Game 3 goes to the Wolves.
Let's hope so. We're going to go live either way on Friday night after the game, again, 8:30 tip. So we'll go live about 45 minutes or so after the final horn. So be sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube to be notified when we go live on Friday night. If you miss it live, you can always listen on your favorite audio platform on the Locked On Wolves feed. A big thank you for listening to the show. A big thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.